Welcome, Sundry readers. I hope you enjoy today's story. Please remember to subscribe. It really helps me out. Happy listening. New Faces, New Friends by Arleta Richardson. Chapter 4, Hudson's Confidante. During the next week, Hudson Curtis was in North Branch more than he was in Greenwood. Strangely enough, it did not seem to be Colleen he came to visit, but me. "Mabel," he said when he found me in Gage's store, "do you have a few minutes to talk to me after you shop? It's really important." "Why, I guess so, Hudson," I replied. "Where will you be?" "Over on the green. I'll wait for you." When I had put my things in the buggy, I crossed the street to the green and sat down on the bench beside him. "I preached yesterday on the Good Shepherd," Hudson began. "I told the people how Jesus cares for his sheep and knows them by name. Then I mentioned that Jesus said that there were other sheep, not of that flock, whom he had come to call." Hudson looked at me anxiously. I knew I was supposed to say something, but I didn't have the vaguest notion what it might be. After an awkward moment, I said, "That must have been inspiring, Hudson." "Yes, but do you think it inspired what I wanted it to?" I was becoming more perplexed by the moment. "Exactly what did you want it to do, Hudson?" "Why, to show the people that Jesus came to call others that are not of their flock." "Oh, you mean Colleen O'Shea?" "Well, yes, her too, of course, but anyone who hasn't been brought up just the way they have. Folks are inclined to be intolerant of newcomers." "Especially newcomers who work in Jake Turner's saloon," I thought. But I said, "That's a message that needs to be preached, all right." I thought back to yesterday in our church. We were pleased to see new faces at the service. Several of Rebecca Handy's boarders attended with her, including Colleen, whom I greeted warmly. "Come sit with Augusta and me," I said. "You won't want to sit back here alone." Colleen accepted with pleasure, and we made our way together to the front of the little church. Flora Abbott, Amelia, and Dorcas smiled at us, but Gladys Burton's hat bobbled indignantly, and she turned her head away. I'm sure Colleen must have wondered what had happened to the love we Christians profess to have for each other. I turned my attention back to Hudson. "Have you seen Colleen since the party?" I asked him. "No, but I thought I might call there before I go back to Greenwood. Do you think she'll want to see me?" "Hudson," I said, "I know the lady looks a lot like me, but I really can't speak for her. Why don't you ask her?" "I thought maybe you would." "That's an interesting thought," I retorted. "But no, thanks. I'd be happy to see you become friends, but I think it had better be your own doing." He nodded dismally. "Of course, you're right. I appreciate your advice." He rose from the bench and looked around. "You won't tell anyone about our conversation, will you?" "If you'd rather I didn't," I replied. "But I don't like to keep things from Len." "This isn't something that matters to him," Hudson said. "It only concerns me." "Perhaps so," I agreed reluctantly. "I'll keep it to myself." "Thank you," Hudson said gratefully. "Can I see you to your buggy?" I waved to several friends on the way out of town. As Regal leisurely pulled the buggy home, I reflected on Hudson's problem. Perhaps I had been wrong to think I should try to bring them together. On the other hand, he did meet Colleen, in a way, before I had anything to do with it. I decided to bow out of the picture and let Hudson take care of his own affairs. When I entered the yard, I saw Sarah Jane sitting on the porch steps waiting for me. "Did you forget I was coming to sew this morning?" she asked. "I've been here nearly 3 minutes." "I knew about it when I left. I intended to be back sooner. Sorry, I was held up. You could have gone inside." "I did. I also put Lilac back in the pasture." "That cow was in the house?" I gasped. "No, but she followed me up on the porch. I know she's a pet, but I didn't invite her in." "She's no pet of mine," I declared. "I know she held me up in the river last spring until Elizabeth could help me out, and I've thanked her for that. But she's still a cow, and she needs to learn her station in life." Sarah Jane took the things I handed her, and I quickly put Regal in the barn. It was going to be hard not to tell her about my morning's events. I couldn't remember many things I had kept from my friend. "Before I forget, you and Len are invited for supper tonight," she announced when I walked into the kitchen. "Jerome and Myra Grayson are coming too."
Good. I won't have to think about what to fix. Len won't be home for dinner. Shall we just grab a sandwich at noon and spend all our time sewing?
Sarah Jane agreed, and we went right to work. I dismissed Hudson and his concerns from my mind. That evening, Thomas came home with a story of a new employee. "I hired a boy to go along with our surveyors this morning," Thomas told us. "Seems like a bright young man, about 15, I'd say. I gave him an axe and told him that his job was to go with the surveyors and follow instructions. 'Do whatever Sam tells you to do,' I said. 'If he wants you to chop something down or out, do it. If you prove that you can follow orders, the job is yours.' 'Yes, sir,' he replied. 'I can follow orders all right.' When they came back in, Sam said that the kid stuck to him like glue. He was never more than 2 paces behind. The axe he was carrying kept drawing Sam's compass off. Finally, Sam said to him, 'We're going to be out here the rest of the week if you don't get rid of your axe.' And what did that young twit do but rear back and fling the axe into the river." "Did he lose his job?" Sarah Jane asked when we had stopped laughing. "No," Thomas replied. "He proved he could follow orders all right. I think he'll be a good worker if I can train him to think, too."
How is Elizabeth doing in your office?
I asked Jerome. "Very well," he replied. "She's a conscientious worker and happier than I've ever seen her. I wish I had a place for Miss O'Shea, too. I was thinking she might work in when the shingle mill is rebuilt, but that may be several months. She needs something better than she has in the meantime." "Mabel already has that worked out," Sarah Jane said. "She thinks the Greenwood minister needs a wife."
Yes, I saw you talking with him this morning, Myra put in. Are you making plans for Colleen? Not at all, I said. Hudson and I just happened to run into each other.
Sarah Jane looked at me sharply, but to my relief she didn't pursue the subject. I knew better than to hope it wouldn't come up again when we were alone, but by then I could have an explanation ready for her. A couple of days later, I went over to the school to get some of my books that had been left there. As I was going through my desk to be sure I had removed all my belongings, I heard the school door open. There at the back of the room stood Hudson Curtis. "I thought I saw you come here, Mabel, so I thought I'd stop in and tell you my plans. You do want to hear, don't you?"
Oh, yes, of course, Hudson, I said. I suppose that this has something to do with Colleen?
He nodded. "It came to me while I was thinking about her yesterday. I think about her most of the time," he admitted. I waited for him to go on.
You were going to tell me your plans?
"Oh, yes. What would you think of asking my father to give her a job in the bank?"
Who asking your father? I inquired.
"I guess I could do it if you didn't want to," he answered.
Hudson, you know I wouldn't do that. How did I get mixed up in all this to begin with?
You asked me if I wanted to meet Colleen, remember? And you encouraged me to call on her. I couldn't deny it.
But, Hudson, I expected you to take over sometime. I can't engineer your whole courtship. I like both you and Colleen, but I can't live your lives for you. Besides, have you thought of what your mother might say about all this?
Yes, and I'd rather not hear it. That's why it would be better if someone else brought it up. He sighed and looked around the room. Then his expression brightened. "Say, won't they need a new teacher this year? Maybe Mr. Williams would hire her." He looked at me hopefully.
She is welcome to apply for the position, I said. As far as I know, it hasn't been filled, but if you think I'm going to apply for her, you're mistaken.
Well, thanks for the suggestion.
What suggestion?
I wondered after Hudson left. In any case, I sincerely hoped that I had seen the last of him for a while. On Saturday, I was weeding in the garden when Hudson appeared. "Don't get up," he said. "I'll just sit down for a minute."
Hello, Hudson. Do you want to see Len? He's out in the field with his father.
"No, that's all right. You'll do." He lapsed into silence and I went on weeding. I was not going to encourage him. "I had a wedding at my church yesterday," he said. "We had no more finished the ceremony when the sheriff came up and arrested the bride for bigamy."
Bigamy?
I exclaimed. I was so surprised I forgot my resolve.
Didn't you know who the people were that you married?
"Well, no," he admitted. "They just came by one day and saw our new church and asked if they could have a wedding there. I didn't see any reason not to marry them. They seemed like a nice young couple." Hudson plucked a few weeds that were beside him. "I'm not paying much attention to my work, I'm afraid. The only time I can see Colleen is during the day because she works evenings. And where can we go that someone isn't going to talk?" I had no answer to that. After a few more remarks, Hudson left. "Don't tell Len about that wedding, will you? I'd be embarrassed if he knew I'd done something so stupid." When Len came in for supper, he said, "I saw Hudson Curtis coming this way. Did he stop here?"
Yes, I told them that you were out in the field. Did you finish out there this afternoon?
"No, but we should be through by Monday noon. What's good for supper tonight?"
Fresh rolls and bean soup.
I told him.
Just what you like on a Saturday night.
I was relieved that no more was said about Hudson, but at the same time I felt guilty for keeping our conversations from Len. I had difficulty thinking what to say to Len without accidentally revealing something I shouldn't. It didn't feel right, and I resented Hudson for imposing this situation on me. I couldn't even discuss it with Sarah Jane, although it was hardly necessary to do that in order to know what her advice would be. End of chapter 4.